Hi, my name is Grace Petty, and I am going to be doing my restorative justice plan on behavioral issues that occur on school campus. This is based on the middle school site that I'm working at and the typical behavioral issues that occur at my school site. It might be different for everybody. We know that we all serve different populations, but this is what I have experienced. So, what is restorative justice? Instead of using traditional discipline methods, we can use restorative justice. So rather than associating justice with punishment, restorative justice associates justice with repair. This overall strategy helps focus more on the why the problem happened, what caused the problem to happen, how are we feeling when the problem happened, and how can we solve this to move forward. This is a strategy that is usually used in the justice system, hence the name restorative justice, but it can also be beneficial to implement within the school system because it can help teach students why the action they did was wrong and what steps they can take to fix it while still serving the appropriate consequences. So depending on the age of many of our students, especially elementary, middle schools, and some high schools, a lot of our students haven't had the opportunity to develop and practice appropriate problem-solving skills, especially for this generation. So while using restorative justice techniques, schools are able to hold their students accountable for the actions they completed, while also teaching them the appropriate ways to act in public and in social settings and how to fix the problem so that eventually they'll be able to do these skills on their own. At my middle school, we serve a population of low socioeconomic status. The majority of the students there are Hispanic. They're usually dealing with hardships at home, things that no one, especially not young kids, should be going through. Some of these issues include having a family member in prison, having multiple families live in a one-bedroom apartment. They're exposed to gang violence in their neighborhood. There's food scarcity. They don't have a lot of clothes. There's domestic violence and no parental supervision due to parents working multiple jobs to pay the bills. The main area of concern would be behavioral issues, but the specific things that we see on our campus include fighting, defiance towards authority figures such as staff members, poor work completion, and drug use, typically in the form of vaping, wax pens, and edibles. These issues can occur in the classroom, they can occur at recess, they occur on the bus, they occur in the hallways during passing period. Of course, these issues also occur off campus, in their neighborhood during times that are not when school is occurring, but it would be hard for us to intervene during those times. It's easier for us to handle the issues that are occurring on campus. And I do want to make a quick note. I did note that one of the behavioral issues is poor work completion, but it's also important for us to consider if the student is cognitively and academically able to complete the work being presented to them. We do have a lot of students that have lower test scores, even though they're in the general education population and not receiving special education services or supports. And we do not have an intervention specialist that completes RTI, academic RTI with our students. So they do not have a lot of support. But there are specific groups of students that are able to complete the work that choose not to. Those are the students that I'm referring to in this presentation. So our assistant principal is in charge of discipline. It can be pretty overwhelming for her due to the population we have and how many students get in trouble per day. We do have 2 campus security officers on campus that usually assist in the investigating and identifying process, but our assistant principal is the person who meets with the students, gathers their stories, presents the consequences, and calls the parents. We don't currently take concrete data, but based on my observations, there are at least two disciplinary actions that occur per day where the assistant principal has to meet with a student. And there are at least 3 students in the office per day serving detention during nutrition and lunch periods. We do have a detention room on campus, but sometimes that room is full, or sometimes students that are in there cannot associate with other students that need to serve to detention, which is why we do have the overflow in the office. Majority of the students are repeat offenders, but we also see new faces fairly often of students that have not been in trouble before. In order to track data for the plan that I'm going to propose, I believe that having a clear data sheet in the front office would be the most effective, with just a couple columns. These columns should include a tally sheet of how many incidents happen per day, the initials of each student that was called up, so that we can track to see the repeat offenders and how often they're called up to the office, and then different categories of the incident. And they can either circle or put tallies next to the categories, and it can just be defiance, drug use, fighting, simple things like that. We don't have to have a whole summary of the incident because the principal is already inputting that information onto Aries. This is strictly just to get numbers, and each student has to check in with the front office before they meet with the assistant principal anyways. So having the office clerk or the assistant principal complete this data sheet would be the most effective way to gather the information. So these are the 3 restorative practices that are part of the plan. The first one is classroom agreements, which is where the teacher will collaborate with the students on typical rules and expectations, what they believe they can add or take away from that list. How should we act with peers? How shouldn't we act with peers? What's socially acceptable? What's not socially acceptable? These rules should be written out on a poster board, displayed in the classroom, and students, I really like when students have the opportunity to go and sign it as if they are signing an agreement. These rules should be referred to throughout the class periods and when students need extra prompting to remember to follow the rules that they all agreed to. The second restorative practice is restorative circles. This will be led by a staff member who will mediate a group of students who are either engaging in conflict with each other, or they're all struggling with a similar issue, such as drug use, defiance, and/or poor work completion. For this one, I mentioned that a staff member will mediate the restorative circle. It really just depends on the school site. Sometimes the school counselors are in charge of leading these circles. The school psychologist may assist. At my campus, we actually do have 2 staff members who are specifically placed there by the district due to our behavioral issues to perform restorative practices. So they do complete restorative circles with the students. Restorative practice number 3 is a check-in, check-out system where staff members will develop a relationship with the more intense repeat offenders. Depending on the severity of the issues, they can either check in with them at the beginning of the day, check out with them at the end of the day, or it can be a weekly check-in where they check in the beginning of the week and then at the end of the week talk about how the week went. And this can be any staff member on campus. It could be the principal, the assistant principal, a campus security officer, a school psychologist, a teacher, an aide, anyone that the staff agrees would have the best connection with the student. Maybe this student has a favorite teacher that they really relate to and that they think is super cool. That would be a good person to consider having them complete the check-in, check-out, because the whole point is to develop that relationship and to not have it feel like it's a punishment, but rather a motivator to come to school and to talk to someone. So the whole idea of response to intervention is to identify struggling students and give them the support they need so that they can be successful in school. And that really is the whole goal and idea of restorative justice. We need to identify these students and figure out how we can fix the problems that they're having so that they're able to be successful. And we really need to identify these students before they fall too far behind and they're dropping out of school and getting in trouble with the police. That's when the situation kind of becomes out of our hands if the student is no longer attending school. So our first restorative practice is a tier 1 intervention, since it is the whole group, the whole class is engaging in the classroom agreement activity. Restorative practice number 2 is a small group activity, making it a tier 2. And I do want to clarify that restorative circles can be done with the entire classroom. But for this plan specifically, I'm proposing that the restorative circles are completed in a small group setting with 5 or 6 students, not the whole class. I think that would make it less effective if the whole class is doing it, and students would be less willing to open up and share based on the population that I'm serving. That may not be the case everywhere else. Since restorative practice number 3 is a one-on-one activity, it would be a tier 3 intervention because this is the most intensive intervention that we would be offering besides something that district would propose. So our first practice aims to resolve conflict, typically with the teacher and the students, addressing those defiance issues. It helps build a relationship and help everyone work together. Our second practice not only resolves group conflicts between students in the group, but I think it also helps clarify any miscommunications and repair relationships and friendships on a more intimate level. The third practice can address any harm or past trauma that the student has felt, but they do have to build that strong relationship and trust the staff member they are checking in with. It can also help encourage them to not engage in conflicts if they're able to build that relationship and respect the opinion that the staff member has about them, and they want to please them and want to make them proud. So the roles and responsibilities of people involved in the plan are administration will be in charge of collecting data, enforcing rules, and communicating with their staff and students. They are definitely the leaders of this plan. So they will set the tone of this plan. If they don't go all in, the teachers won't go all in. The students won't care. Right? So it's important that they continue to attend their trainings at the district office, train their teachers, communicate with parents when necessary, and they stick to the plan. The school psychologist can help train teachers to solve minor behaviors in the classroom. They can offer to come and observe the more intense behaviors in the class to see if there's anything else they can offer to help support the teacher in terms of specific strategies, or maybe they'll see a student and think, oh, I think it's time to move towards an assessment due to some of the things they were doing in a couple of observations. They can also help explain check-in, check-out systems to staff members. They can provide these check-in, check-out sheets that teachers and students will sign every time they meet, teachers or staff members. They could possibly be one of the staff members completing the check-in, check-outs, and they may need to assist or host restorative circles, again, depending on the roles that the school site expects them to be a part of. School counselors can also lead restorative circles. They can collaborate with teachers about struggling students. This is more in the SEL and mental health way. I think the school psychologist will help teachers who are struggling with students in the behavioral way. The school counselors can also complete the check-in, check-outs, lead trainings on whole group restorative practices, such as the classroom agreements, and communicate with parents if a student needs more intensive support, outside the school setting. Teachers will lead whole group restorative practices. They can communicate with the school psychologist and school counselor about students that need the tier 2 or tier 3 supports. I think it's important that teachers communicate with parents about positive things their students are doing and that the progress that they're making in class. They should help address the academic needs in relation to behavior. As I explained before, some of our students don't complete work based on cognitive and academic struggles. So I think it's important to rule these out when deciding if it's a true behavioral defiance case or if it's a learning disability. They also need to create a welcoming, safe, and respectful environment for the students. So many students that I've talked to really believe in respect. It's a big part of their culture. It's in their neighborhood. And if they feel that someone doesn't respect them, they will not respect them back. And it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter the role. Students are oftentimes defiant because they don't think the teacher respects them. And it's true, the teacher doesn't. So I think a lot of teachers need to take this under consideration when learning how to communicate with this specific population. The students will need to participate in the classroom agreements and discussions, make an effort to improve their behaviors, be open communicating with peers and staff members in those smaller groups, continue attending school and attempt to complete their schoolwork. And I believe these roles and responsibilities will need to be incentivized. So they will need to be motivated to complete their role. The parent or guardian will need to continue communicating with teachers and administration, even if some of the messages they're getting are negative. They need to continue working on their restorative techniques in their home. They need to seek outside help in the community with the help of a social worker or school official if their child needs outside care, outside services. And they need to be present in their child's life, ensuring safety and making sure their student is getting good grades and checking in with them. Hey, did you do your homework? I noticed you have a missing assignment on Aries. Let's get it out. Start doing it. I think having that parental guidance at home would make a big difference in a lot of these students' lives and their grades. So the middle school I work at is very pro-discipline from what we have reviewed so far. Our typical procedure is currently when a student gets into trouble, the teacher or staff member that caught them notifies campus security or the principal, assistant principal, whoever escorts the student to the office, whether it's campus security or the assistant principal, takes the student in, has them write down a statement on an incident report, and then they begin investigating the incident through interviews with other teachers, with students, and through video footage. Once the assistant principal figured out what happened, she'll carry out the consequence. So in terms of preventing and responding, restorative practices can be used to prevent a future issue from occurring. However, they are usually completed in the first place when they're responding to an incident. So if there's a fight on campus, they might have a restorative circle, and then that could help prevent future issues, but that initial fight still had to occur in order for the intervention to take place. So other interventions such as PBIS and school-wide reward systems, assemblies, courses on specific topics could help serve as interventions that could prevent these behaviors from happening in the first place. I also think it's important for teachers to consistently remind students of the rules and hold them accountable for these rules, hold parent meetings explaining the rules to parents, and the school needs to have an overall expectation of this is how we act at Vista View Middle School, and you need to meet these expectations and standards. Restorative practices are better used in response to an event. if a teacher witnessed a conflict that occurred between students, they would obviously let the appropriate staff know. Their restorative practices would be implemented, and such as the restorative circle, and hopefully that would stop future issues from occurring. Classroom agreements could be used as a preventative intervention, but it could also be in response to the class being out of control and there's no relationship between the teacher and the students. And the check-in, check-out system is used in response to that intense, severe behavior and needs to be closely monitored. So plans for ongoing communication. In terms of professional development, districts should continue to hold staff meetings and trainings to continue growing and teaching restorative skills. During these trainings, outside professionals and specialists could be brought in to host on specific topics, such as restorative circles for drug use, restorative circles for this, how to do a classroom agreement, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. Teachers should also be taking data and tracking progress and bringing this into the staff meetings. So there shouldn't just be one staff meeting. Hey, this is what you should implement in your classroom. Okay, this is how you should implement it. Track the data, and then we're going to have a follow-up meeting and discuss how it's going and what needs to be changed or what needs to be added to the plan. When communicating with parents, I know that most schools and most principals send out weekly emails to the family, just recapping what happened this week. Oh, look at this assembly. Look what the soccer team did. It was so great. Here's what's coming up for this next week. I think it would be nice if there was a little section for restorative practice of the week. This is what we're implementing at school. See how you can implement this at home, and including resources for the parents in terms of restorative practices and discipline to use at home that are similar to use at school, because if home and school are on the same page, we're going to see a lot more progress and in a quicker amount of time. Administration and teachers should also be reaching out to parents directly about more intense situations that are resulting in the tier 2 or tier 3 supports. When communicating with students should have multiple opportunities and various ways of learning and accessing the school rules and policies. I know many kids have said, well, how am I supposed to know that that was in the rule book? I don't have a rule book. I don't read the rule book, right? So holding assemblies, explaining the rules, having a school-wide video played that explains restorative practice, introducing people that you can go to for help, either school psychologist, a school counselor. And I think explaining restorative justice and explaining the benefits and the incentives will also play a big part in if students are willing to complete and participate in this overall plan. And as I mentioned before, the students will obviously need to be motivated, so school-wide reward system. I know a lot of schools will pass out like fake money or kind of like a token system where then students can go and purchase things. But I think having the clear expectations and very motivating age-appropriate rewards and even holding rewards assemblies is a good way to help motivate the students to participate and want to succeed and change. So here are some resources for staff members. There's information about restorative circles, ideas for things to put on classroom agreements and how to implement them, SEL lessons and restorative practices, and how to create a safe space in the classroom. And thank you for watching my restorative justice plan presentation. I hope you're able to get good information about how to help support campuses that are struggling with behavioral issues on campus. Thank you.